Yeah, we don't usually do pre-records. We usually do a live show. So we actually usually start our videos with like when that ends, we'll usually have like a silly intro video, and that kind of leads to like a little bit of silly banter. But like doing a pre-record is not usually something we do. So we are interviewing Conor Gallagher.
And
Now,
Anthony,
Conor,
I do have a bio we can read if you want.
all right. Go ahead, read the bio. Let's do it professionally. Go ahead, Rob.
Let's try it anyways. Give me a couple seconds to pull it up. So keep talking for a little while, Ant.
Yeah, it's not very professional, Rob. So
bio's pretty boring, so I don't care if you skip it, man.
Conor's never seen our show. He's in for something fresh. That's all right.
Thank goodness I have something fresh, because as I was telling you, I've done 65. I think this is 66 interviews in the last 6 or 7 months, and they're all the same.
So who's all right? So
I hope this is different, because I
it definitely will be, because all right. So I watched you on Kennedy's channel. I think it was last month or a couple weeks ago. I saw you on Kennedy Hall's channel, and I was looking at it, and I'm like, all right, there's got to be a better way to do this, because the way Kennedy presented it was kind of like an infomercial, and I'm like, I don't know if that's the way to go with it. Like, I think like you have 16 kids, right?
Yeah, 2 grandkids. Yeah,
16. What are the ages?
So the oldest just turned 23 2 days ago on the 28th, Feast of St. Thomas Aquinas. It's like one of the only
under 23. That's wild.
Yeah, okay. And I know that because I went to his little. We had lunch today to kind of celebrate his birthday a few days late, and so all the way down to 4 months. So that little one is destroying my wife's sleep, and I lecture her. I sit her down and say, listen, this is ridiculous. You need to sleep through the night. And she's stubborn, resistant. She just won't do it. She refuses to honor her father's directive. I mean,
okay, so
I don't understand.
You've done
what her problem is.
Interviews since June, and you have a 4-month-old?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife's good, but it's just part of the job. So it's what
Do you have twins in there, or are they all single births?
Yeah, they're awesome. I got twin 7-year-olds, little boys. They're fraternal, and they're like complete opposites in every way. And that was purgatory on earth when they were born. And then
wait, now all right, so wait, slow down. Let me get in here. Right. I gotta figure some things out here. All right, so there's 7. What number in order are they when they come?
They're 11 and 12.
11 and 12. Okay, so you have 10 kids. Your wife gets pregnant with twins.
Yes, guys, because I'm I'm Mr. Open to Life, right? I got my pro-life badge,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And I'm sitting there saying, hey, I tell God, look, just give me one shot at a time, and we just take it one shot at a time, and every 2 years or whatever it is. And it's like we never had them every 2 years. It was always like 16 months, 18 months. But then all of a sudden, boom, he hits me with twins, or her with twins. I acted like I had the hard job. But it was
how hard pregnancy is on the father.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, I always say that it's not fair, because look, she could gain like 30 something pounds during pregnancy. I would do the same, and yet she would lose 20 pounds in 8 minutes. I mean, that's not fair. It took me another 8 months to get back down to my pre-pregnancy weight. It's ridiculous.
They get that nice bed in the hospital, and we get the little folding chair that doesn't lay flat even.
Yeah, it's like, honestly,
that's everyone says to my wife, they say, you look amazing for having 16 kids. And I'm like, how about me? How about me? And they don't even make no reference about how I look for having 16 kids. I was hoping you guys would say something about that.
But I grew up in a house with 9, so I'm third of 9. And I thought that was a lot. Like
it is.
It was kind of mayhem. My mom had 6 kids under the age of 7 at one point or so. Oh no, 5 kids. So it wound up. My parents had 4 kids. Then there was an 8-year gap where they were using artificial birth control. And then my parents had like a reversion, came back to the church and stopped using birth control, and then had 5 kids in a row, like in 7 years. And my mom had like 3 or 4 miscarriages in there also. But I remember just going to friends' houses, and like the joke was always like, oh, so is your mom pregnant again? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, are you serious? Your mom's pregnant again? But to have 16, I can't even fathom what life is like in the Gallagher home. And like, what I want to kind of get a glimpse into the life of the Gallagher home.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, have you ever had Thanksgiving dinner when it's like your whole, like your extended family comes over? It's just
Yeah.
like every day. You know,
Yeah.
people always say, "Oh, how was Thanksgiving? How was Christmas? Oh, so busy, whatever." I'm like, it's just like that every day. So it's really not that big of a difference. But no, I mean, seriously, it's not any different than another family. I mean, there are certain dynamic differences, but you get into, first of all, it's not so obvious, but people forget this. You don't have 16 babies, that's
Mhm.
how it works. They actually grow up and leave. So
Not just leave, the older ones care for the younger ones. Like I remember
big
I
time,
would
big time.
like I helped my mom with the little
So,
ones. Like,
come on
I
now.
did.
I know
I'm
you.
telling you, Rob. Why you
Uh-huh.
I'm telling you,
Sure.
I help my mom with the kids.
I'm going to ask your
All
brother
the older ones.
Joey.
All
I'm
the
gonna
older
text him right now.
they were like my own kids. I'm telling you, I changed diapers. It wasn't like my mom was caring for every little kid.
No, I call it mid-level management.
Yeah.
The older kids are and seriously, like, this was an hour, maybe 2 hours ago. My 7-year-old, one of the twins, Thomas, he changed the baby's diaper. He took the baby and changed the diaper and came back in. I mean, it's like he's 7, he can do that.
Yeah.
Most 17-year-old girls that they don't know how to change diapers, and he does. 7-year-old boy.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's they have definitely look. You don't have all babies at one time. My dinner house is my dinner table's very busy, is very chaotic, but it's no more different than any other family. But here's actually where my deal is sort of better in a sense, right? Because when you get to a certain point, you have a ton of kids, and I think that's 10. I mean, 8, 9, 10 is a big family. 12, 13 is huge. But when you get to an enormous family, you sort of surrender to the situation and you say, okay, we're not going to do what we tried to do when we had 5 kids. Like when I had 5 kids, we had, I think we had maybe have like 8 kids, but I remember I had 5 kids, guys, on like 3 different baseball teams. And so we had 3 teams going all at one time. And it was just nuts. And then like my daughter had something else. I think she ran cross country at the same time. And it was getting insane. And so we said, okay, if we keep having kids, we have 10, 11, 12 kids. We can't do this. It's impossible. I remember telling my wife one day, we could not figure out how to get all the kids to their game or practice or whatever. And I said, look, you just got to put the 10-year-old in an Uber and send them to the field. And she's like, you're crazy. That's not safe. And I was like, you're right. Give him my gun. Then put him in the Uber.
I was going to say that. Give him a gun. He'll be fine.
Yeah. So, we had to surrender to some of the things that your normal family does, right? And sports was one of them. So we had to give up the young athletics, right? We don't do little league anymore. Little kids, 8-year-olds aren't on soccer teams anymore. What we did is like we have a homeschool co-op kind of thing where they go to CrossFit, and so they got really into CrossFit. My 10-year-old is big time into CrossFit right now. And then when they're in high school, they play rec ball, they play flag football, they play rec basketball. My 19-year-old is probably going to play basketball for Belmont Abbey next year, and all he ever did was play rec ball in high school. So, my point is that it's just a lot of families when you have a bunch of little kids, and I get it. I was there. I was the little league coach. I don't know how many years I coached in a row. When you have that, you kind of feel like it's necessary. But when you're catapulted into a huge family, or your family goes through any kind of major upheaval, like people that have a disabled child or somebody gets really sick in the family, you start realizing that little league and travel soccer is not the most important thing in the world. So actually now, guys, I have more dinners at home with my family in the evenings. My families are more relaxing than they ever were before when I just had a bunch of little kids. Now it's much better. And my kids still play sports in high school. One of them is about to play college basketball. It works out, but you actually have to surrender to some of the worldly expectations. And then actually, I'm telling you, your life gets a whole lot easier after that.
How do you manage like the one-on-one time with each kid because look, like that, it really is a difficult thing, right? Like each kid, all right, so my mom has had this gift where she made every one of us feel like we were her favorite. If you ask any one of my siblings, every one of them will tell you they were my mom's favorite. It's just even the sister, even though all the wives, like all my brother's wives, they all think they're my mom's favorite daughter-in-law. My mom has this way of making every one of us feel like we're the most important person in her life. And it's a very difficult thing to do. And I mean, I can't imagine with that many people just to really have that one-on-one time with each kid.
We're going to have our 4th in August. And my oldest, we asked them when they just found out about a month ago. We asked them if they were excited. And my oldest goes, Yeah, but that just means less time with mommy, and I don't get
Yeah.
enough time with mommy now. So yeah, how,
It is kind of hard.
how do you give that sort of time to each one of them?
Well, you just hit on, I think, what's the biggest cross that mom and dad have to bear. It's not the dishes and the laundry. It's actually like a good, loving mom and dad want to spend a lot of time one-on-one with each kid. So that's like the hidden cross that I have to bear, is that I don't get to spend time with, say, my 10-year-old son. Actually, he's 11. I forget. They change every year.
Yeah, they change fast.
So-
They go fast.
So, but the 11-year-old son, David, I don't get to spend near the amount of time with him as I did my first couple sons, right? So it's a cross I have to bear. But here's the thing, to steal a line from my absolute favorite Catholic theologian, Hillary Clinton, she said, it takes a village. It takes a village. But look, I mean, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So she's right. It does take a village. And so here's the thing, the environment has to be joyful. Of course, you have to look for opportunities to spend alone time with your kids. For example, I'm getting on a plane in 3 days, and I'm flying to Alabama to go be on EWTN, a TV show, and talk about this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking my 11-year-old with me, and my wife's like, "Why are you taking him to a TV station?" I'm like, "That's pretty cool." And then she's like, "What else is around there?" And she finds out that NASA has like space camp right
in
down the street
Huntsville.
in Huntsville.
Yeah.
So I called my secretary, said, get all the tickets you can to this thing.
Are you going to break it to your
11-year-old.
son? Are you going to break it to your son that the moon landing is fake while you go on that trip?
Oh,
He already knows. He already knows.
Based.
I mean, my kids are homeschooled. They learn a very important, one of the most important points in U.S. history is the faking of the moon landing. So,
can I tell you what it's like from the kids' perspective a little bit? Because So I was in the first batch, and when we were, like you were saying, like when you have the first few, you're able to dedicate a lot of time and a lot of attention to them and do things with them. Like my dad took the older ones to Disney, and like we would go to like trips like that. But then by the time the younger ones came, our trips were more like Sunnycroft Ranch, and like we'd have to like do things that he could actually afford. And he had the big van, and we'd all pack in it, and we would go. I also had a much younger version of my dad. Like a much younger version of my dad. So my dad, when I was 12, 13 years old, my dad was in his early 40s or late 30s, early 40s. He would be able to go snow skiing with us and do things like that. But he also had a bad temper. And then once my younger siblings got the experience my dad, they got a much calmer version of my dad, but also a much older version of my dad, where he wasn't up to the physicality of it as much anymore and stuff like that,
All right, so I've thought about this subject a ton. You're asking a great series of questions. I've thought about this a ton. That's exactly what's happening with me. I was Mr. Young and energetic, and I was also an a-hole. I mean, I could really blow my fuse. I still do sometimes, but I go nuclear way less than I used to. I'm calming. Yeah. I'm maturing. So what are my older kids or younger?
How old are you, Connor?
43.
No.
43. Yeah. Yeah.
You're my age. That's funny, dude.
Yeah. So,
kids.
but with the younger kids, first of all, your younger brothers, your younger sisters, they had you too, not just your older dad.
Yeah.
They have the older siblings. They have a much better village, a much better tribe that they're growing up in. And also, guys, I want to write a book on this very subject because, and I've done some research on it, the amount of saints that come from the bottom of a huge family is enormous. Yeah. There is something to that. And I'd be willing to bet that the ratio, and this is what I can't prove yet, but I want to, that a higher percentage of saints, a much higher percentage of saints, come from the lower part of the family than the top part of the family. Catherine of Siena, number 21 or 22 or something crazy, right? Therese of Lisieux, she was one of the babies, right? So it goes on and on. And I think it's because if mom and dad are trying to live the faith, they're trying to have a virtuous home, they're trying to have a religious home, the older siblings contribute to that. It's a net positive. In our world, all this talk about nasty teenage girls and the teenagers are nasty and there's constant fighting. I'm sorry, I haven't had that experience. My teenage daughter, who's now an adult and has a baby, she was an absolute joy to have. My next daughter's 14. I had a lot of boys and now I have a lot of girls, but I got in touch with my feminine side as I got older. Yeah. but so I haven't had this like nasty teenage thing. I don't,
Yeah,
when people tell me about these things, we don't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My daughters.
My point is that
are like that too.
they're contributing to a virtuous home. They're adding stuff that you and your wife can't add. And so I think the chances of your youngest children growing up to be saints is even better. And so they're not left out. It might be the very inverse.
Yeah, that's really interesting you're saying that, because the especially because my parents' conversion came at the later stage, so the younger ones got a much more religious upbringing than the older ones.
Yeah,
So
that's usually the case. Yeah,
that's what wound up happening. Like I have my younger sister. She was like studying she went for a vocation. She was staying with the which one was she with?
Passionist.
The Passionist
In
nuns.
Kentucky.
And yeah, it's interesting that you're saying that with the younger kids. They got to soak in a more patient father too. I think that has a lot to do with it too. Like, you're calming down in your older age now.
And it's not just that. Like, my kids have taught me so much about fatherhood and even about the faith, right? And I only have 3 right now, and the oldest is 6, but I've learned so much from raising them that I know that I'm a better father now than I was 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh, tremendous, man. I mean, I'm constantly learning, dude. I got a long way to go, but I kind of joke that God gave me so many kids so I could keep trying to get it right.
Well, can I ask you this? Because especially, I know a lot of people that watch our show, like for me too, like my kids, as they're getting older, what do you find the best way to actually instill the faith in them? Like, is it really just raising them in this big family and them just soaking in the values of it? Or like, what is the catechesis for your kids where they actually understand the reasoning behind all this? And have all of your kids actually made the faith their own? I think so many parents are struggling. Like, how do I make sure my kids, like the one thing we have to do as parents, especially as fathers, like your greatest task is to hand the pearl of great price on to your children. If you fail at that, that's so harsh.
Yeah, it has. I think about this constantly, and I believe wholeheartedly that it has almost nothing to do with quote unquote catechesis, and it has everything to do with formation. And there's a difference. And so this is not about opening the skull, insert Baltimore Catechism and close the skull. Guys, that's not it. Okay. What it is, because they can just carry around Chat GPT in their pocket and they got it. So that's not it. Excuse me, I keep coughing. What it is it's creating. I've talked about this a lot in the Well Ordered Family book, which I'm not trying to just hawk that.
No, we're gonna. Well, that's the thing. That was part of this. What I was getting at with the way I'm handling this is the way Kennedy presented it was just an infomercial for the book, where I want people to kind of get an understanding of who you are and where this experience comes from and where the wealth of knowledge for the book comes from. So that's kind of what I was setting up for.
Well, here it is. So look, here's the thing. It's about the environment that you create for your children. I don't know the better words to call it. It's an environment. I call it an ecosystem because it's actually multiple little environments that all come together to make an ecosystem that's unique to Anthony's family, unique to Rob's family and Connor's family. Each one's a little different. Now, what is that ecosystem made up of, right? Well, again, an ecosystem is like you have an environment of animals, you have an environment of plants or water, and all these things come together, and it really is supposed to feed off of each other. That's what an ecosystem, it's like a self-contained environment. Well, in my book, I talk about there's 6 external factors, and I think this is very, very helpful for people. You have to orchestrate, you have to be the architect of your environment, your ecosystem for your family, and it's made up of what I call it the STREP situation, the STREP ecosystem. It's an acronym. We all have strep throat. In fact, we got strep throat at my house, which is probably why I'm coughing. One of my daughters, my 5-year-old, got diagnosed with strep today. Okay. And we've had like 3 other kids in the last week. It's a total pain, but strep, social environment. Okay. This is first of all, their social environment, technological environment. If you don't think these cell phones are an environment and Xbox and all, it's an environment unto itself. Religious environment, recreational environment, educational environment, and professional environment. And that's you and your wife's professional environment, and it's your teenage kids who get a job at the bagel shop, that environment. Strep, social, technological, religious, recreational, educational, professional. I think if you look at your life, every situation that you guys are going into, it fits into one of those categories, right? And you have to think about each one of those and say, okay, have my wife and I constructed a situation where our kids are safe in their social environment, they're safe in their technological environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Are they good in that? So you cannot, people say, how do you raise 15 kids? I don't raise 15, 16 kids. I manage environments. My kid today, see, at this very moment that we're recording this, I got 2 kids that are at basketball practice right now, and the 17-year-old's driving, and they got a buddy with them, and the buddy's spending the night at our house. It happens all the time, but I know most of the kids that are on the basketball team. I know who they can hang out, who they can't hang out with. I know when they're going to be home. I'm managing this environment. It's complete. And I'm able then, because there's very tight constraints around each environment, they have tremendous freedom within that environment because I've made the environment safe. It's like you make a room baby proof, then the kid can crawl around and do whatever the hell they want to do. Right. But if you don't make the room baby proof, you got to chase that kid all over the place. And you got to say, no, 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 no. So spend a lot of time thinking about their educational system. Who are they hanging out with on school? Can you give them a device and let them have some kind of freedom on it because the proper constraints are in place? Can you allow them to participate in sports or that church activities or whatever it is, and give them extreme autonomy and flexibility within it because that's a safe environment? We miss out, guys, because we put our kids in totally, I want to curse, but I'm not, total crappy environments. And then we try to insert catechesis into their brain as if that's going to save the day. And it never does. We had an entire generation in the 1950s, my dad, your dads, they were grown up, raised Catholic, put in Catholic schools. They had nuns in habits. They had priests in collars. They had the Baltimore Catechism. They had all the catechesis in the world. And half the generation left the faith because by the time they were teenagers, they had absolutely a horrible environment in which they were maneuvering in the crazy 60s. The catechesis does almost nothing if the environment is not correct. So that's the answer to the question. You've got to build the environment.
I agree with that 100%. I also think a lot of it was fathers at some point left religion to the wives. Like fathers kind of just took a back seat and thought religion was the wife's job and the wife would take care of it. And that kind of happened in my house, and it's a very like I think when kids see the father take the faith seriously, that has a huge effect on them. So
you've seen the stats on that, right? I mean, the stats are real. Like the church, mom taking kids to church really doesn't do anything statistically. Dad's taking kids to church does everything. And that came out of like Harvard, which has an ulterior motive, but I mean, it's such a clear statistic. You can't get around it. Dad has more impact in this.
What was your upbringing like? Did you grow up in a big Catholic family? Did you have a later conversion? Like, did you and your wife discuss like, okay, we're going to have a very fruitful marriage beforehand? And like, how did that all come about?
I was raised in a great family of six kids. It was huge for the day and time. Like I didn't know anybody that had a bigger family than us. I'm raised in the South, right? So North Carolina. When my dad grew up here, it was less than 0.5% Catholic. I mean, so he really grew up a minority, big time. And so when he was growing up as a Catholic in North Carolina in the 50s, no kidding, he had to hang out with the blacks and the Jews because that was the only people he could hang with. You know what I mean? And, it's because there was serious anti-Catholicism, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why I became such a good basketball player, So, so anyway, so by the time I was Catholic, like we had a couple Catholic schools in town, but it was not it was not big. And I was the only Catholic kid in the neighborhood. And I was like introduced as the Catholic kid. So, I mean, I felt some of that. Now, Charlotte, which is where I grew up, every banker from New York and New Jersey has moved in and invaded. We call it the second invasion.
It's funny because another New Yorker is going to invade there next weekend.
Oh, really?
We're going there to speak at a men's conference.
Okay. Are you coming to Charlotte? To Charlotte? Yeah, all right, I'll see you there. Yeah, I'll see you there.
Oh, you'll be there.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
We'll meet in person.
Yeah. So, anyway, my point is I did not grow up in a culturally Catholic home environment, right? My home was Catholic. And when you were, there was no cultural Catholicism. So if you were going to be Catholic, you had to mean it.
Yeah.
You had to mean it. And there's something good about a Catholic being a minority. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to take it serious. And so I had to learn very quickly to like kind of stand up for myself and be proud of my faith, because I didn't have any friends in the neighborhood or whatever, or summer camp or whatever. So, great parents, loved me a lot, taught me the faith as best they could. And then when I get married, though, it's like, my wife and I didn't have a goal of like, hey, let's set like the world record here and get our own reality show. Let's do that. Let's have a reality show and be more normal than the weird Amish people. No, it wasn't like that. But I did hear once that they get $50,000 an episode. So I was like, honey, we gotta think about this.
We could definitely do a reality show about you.
We gotta think about this, And my wife looks way better than the Amish wives, I'm telling you. So we'd get $65,000 an episode. Okay. So, but anyway, my point is, no, we did not have a perspective that we were going to have this huge family. It wasn't a race, but we learned very quickly that we went to Steubenville together, and we really did learn that people abuse NFP, and they use NFP. It wasn't complicated for me to see artificial contraception as a problem. I got that, but then it was drilled into us somewhere along the line that NFP should be a pretty extreme circumstance. You don't just do it because you want a Mercedes or you want an extra, you want your vacation house or whatever. You need a damn good reason. And so with that, we just kind of were open to life. Each kid we'd reassess, and we'd think, how's my wife doing? Is she physically good? Is she emotionally, psychologically good? We always knew I was completely unstable, so that was just a given. I'm never gonna be. But so we always had to assess, and we took it seriously. And then, but we were like, we don't really have a reason to postpone this for very long. Sometimes we wait a little bit with NFP, but so anyway. One kid after another, man. That's just kind of what happened. And then we had twins because God has a sense of humor. Yeah. So no, there's no goal. And we started young. We're still going. She's 43. I'm 40. How old am I? What did I say earlier?
You said 43.
I'm 45. Yeah, I'm 45. She's 43. I'm sorry. I'm stupid. I was born in 1979. I'm 45. She's 43. Yeah. So, because it's funny, because I usually end up talking about my wife's age. I think it kind of threw me off. And so
that's dangerous.
Yeah, no, I know. So I just think that each kid you have to prayerfully consider, and you need to remember, people out there, good Catholics need to remember that you really can have a contraceptive mindset even with NFP. You really can, and that's something that people need to take serious.
How do you and your wife make sure that you two still have that healthy relate? Because I try to. Any couples I meet, I always tell them, like, if you and your girl are good, the kids are going to benefit from you and the wife being good. Like, no matter what, you have to work on your relationship with your wife. If they see the parents love one another and they get along and they're friends, it's just going to trickle down to them no matter what. Don't let your kids come between you. But like, how, when you have that hectic of a household, do you and your wife make time for one another?
It's easier than when we had like 5 little kids. Okay. Because when you had like 5 kids, 7 and under or whatever, you're a slave to them. Right. I mean, and you have no middle management. You don't have babysitters in the house. No one can drive but you. It's just, so when I meet parents that kind of are in that situation, I tell them, and it's actually reassuring. I'm saying, you're in the worst part.
Yeah.
It's going to get better from here, So Rob, you got 3 little kids. Is that right? Is that what it was?
4th on the way. Yeah.
3, 6 and under with the 4th on the way. Yeah.
You're in the worst part, Rob. So like you light it. Okay. So I say that about 12 years old, when the oldest is 12, things start getting a lot easier because they're able to really babysit. You can actually leave, go down to the restaurant down the street. And then when they get 16, that's kind of the promised land, because you never have to go get milk at 9 o'clock again at night. Like you can send them, but then when they turn like 18, 19, guess what? you can get on a plane with your wife and leave. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, now my wife and I, except for when you have a baby and you're chained to that. I mean, that's just like an anvil around your ankle. But, I think our life is easier now because my wife and I have more flexibility. We can go out whenever we want to. We have built-in babysitters. So we get a lot of time alone. Do you have to be very intentional about it? Oh, hell yeah, you really do. And you have to make that very important. And when you go out, you can talk about kids and stuff, but try to come up with creative things to talk about other than logistics. If you go hang out with your wife, all you do is talk about logistics, about all the athletic events next week. Try to talk about other stuff. So I really hate the whole thing. And I've told priests, stop telling men, date your wife, I'm getting so tired of hearing date my wife. I know I got to date my wife, but just find something else to say. It's just like somebody that doesn't know anything about relationships is what they say. So of course I date my wife, but you really do have to put your wife number one, and it does not hurt your kids for them to know that mom is number one and you're number two. You're a great number two, but your mom's number one. So yeah, we have to do it. We have to protect our relationship, and we're a lot better at that now than when we were a lot younger. But yeah, you got to be ruthless with it. Otherwise, you're just sucked into the abyss of kid land, and you have to guard against that.
Yeah. Which kid is your favorite?
Yeah. I got one in my head,
Here's the thing. Anthony 100% believe he's his mom's favorite.
Yeah, every one of us do that. You ask my kids will tell you that dad's favorite. All right, so let's get into the book.
Right now, it's you don't want the answer. You don't want the
answer.
Oh, he does.
I want to talk. I love controversy. Go ahead.
In one way, I can say that my two oldest, because they've just given me grandbabies, so that was a pretty amazing thing. My 18-year-old.
Wait, is there an aunt and uncle older than the niece?
Yeah. So my granddaughter is older than my daughter.
That's
right.
Amazing.
So my baby Monica, named for Augustin's mother, was born an aunt. She was an Aunt Monica in utero, right? So it's kind of cool. Yeah. And so my wife and her, I watched my daughter and my wife grow together, right? It was amazing. It was like Father of the Bride Part 2, whatever. People always say that. But it was very cool. But it's interesting. I have an 18-year-old son named Peter, and he lives in I have a guest house on my property, and he commutes to Belmont College, which is about 30 minutes away. I bought this property for that reason. And why am I kind of saying him right now? It's not because he's my favorite in all circumstances. However, since I have an 18-year-old son living on my property, or is he 19? Hell, I can't remember. Maybe 19, whatever he is, probably 19.
Old enough.
Old enough. And my point is, he's a young adult. He has a part-time job. And we have become like friends as adults, right? And that's just kind of happened very quickly. Like your kids go from obnoxious teenagers with bad haircuts to like young professionals, like real quick. Boom, it just kind of happens. And it's happened with him in the last 6 months. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so he's popped up into this maturity level. And now it's like I have one of my best friends living in my guest house.
Yeah,
and so
my son's 19. I got that going right now too.
Yeah, there you go. Right. And so it feels really great to not have to feel, of course I'm parenting, but he'll text me at like 9:00 at night and say, hey, you want to come watch this movie with me? I said, sure. Last night I'm having a little campfire with the little kids. Just a few feet from where my home office is. I got a little campfire right outside my home office. And I have little kids out there, and they go to bed. And then my 19-year-old comes out, and we sit there for 30, 45 minutes by the fire. And it's just like two buddies. So in a sense, he's not my favorite, but he's like, the situation is my favorrit.
He's at an age. The age. It's an awesome age because you don't have to like correct every little thing they do anymore. Like he's because there's an interesting thing for the kids too, because I'm 17 years older than my younger brother, or 16, maybe 17 years older than my younger brother. So I moved out. I was married at 22 and he was like 5, So I didn't know him until he turned around 17. Like I knew him, but like I
I know what you mean.
didn't like know him. Then when he turned like 17, he could come and hang out with me, and it's like I made a whole new brother when I was like at 30. It was a really interesting time, you know. But let's get into the book a little bit. So Rob read Parenting for Eternity, and he was blown away by it. Like he was like, oh, he couldn't wait to talk to you. So Parenting for Eternity, Rob had read. That was one that he was excited to talk to you about. But you got a new one out too, right?
Yeah. I'm cranking out a lot of books. So 2 books that have come out recently, Well-Ordered Family, which is like, all right. So Parenting for Eternity, this is my favorite book that I've written.
I love that one so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I would say that it's like the why we parent. It's not a how-to book, right? But it's about why we pray the rosary with our kids, why we raise them in the liturgy or certain devotions, why we talk about angels and demons, why we have to think about the 4 last things in regards to our children. So it's a why book. But then this is cool, but it's like a how-to. This is like how to get order in your life because you're spinning out of control and pulling out your hair and your wife's on meds. Like this is kind of like how to, you know? So, you know, that there's different purposes for different books, but you know, I'd rather talk about Parenting for Eternity. I've talked about Well-Ordered Family all the time. I mean, I'll talk about both, but they do kind of fit together. But to be quite frank, this one is more important. Okay. Thomas Aquinas says grace builds upon nature, right? And so, you know, in other words, you can't just go pray. You actually have to work. You know, you have to put things in motion. You can't just pray for your kids. You have to build structures and environments and raise them and feed them and clothe them. And you got to make money and you got to pay bills. You can't just go to adoration. So, you know, the scripture is very clear on that. So this book, Well-Ordered Family, and the 6-part system I've created, that's the natural order. Now, the reason that this is so important today, guys, is because the world is insane. The most rare thing is common sense. This is about how to structure your day-to-day life with your family. That's the natural order of things. And once that's clear, then the grace can flow like a tsunami. But God needs us to get our natural order straight so that he can pour grace on us enormously. And I think that the Parenting for Eternity book, which is real small, it's more about the supernatural side of parenting, if that makes sense. And that's where the grace really comes in.
Yeah. How did you get the gig at 10?
So I went to, I got a master's in philosophy and my law degree, and I was practicing law for a little bit. I did real estate closings and estate planning and some basic stuff. And then I went off and clerked for a federal judge, and that's a 2-year gig. And that's kind of like the best job a young lawyer can have. And I was totally unqualified, but he liked me. So I got the job, and I did that for 2 years. Awesome job. Great Catholic judge. And when I was almost done with that, my dad, who had been a successful business guy, he gave me a call and he said, "Son, I hear that a company called Tan Books is in bankruptcy." And we had known about Tan. And so he said, "Why don't you come and work for me and basically represent me as my lawyer and try to acquire this company out of bankruptcy?" And he had started a little Catholic publishing company. It didn't really do anything at this point, but it was just kind of like there because he just wanted to be in Catholic publishing. So once my clerkship was over, I went and I worked for my dad basically as his lawyer. And I went up to, we were in North Carolina. Tan was located in Rockford, Illinois. It was a very long and cumbersome bankruptcy proceeding. And I worked with the lawyers up there. And for about a year, I worked on winning this case to convince the bankruptcy court to sell Tan to us. And we prevailed. And one day I'm standing up there in Rockford, Illinois, and we finally win after all these court cases. And I call my dad and I was like, "Dad, you own Tan now." And I was like, "Well, what do I do now?" And he's like, "Well, why don't you go over to the building and run it?" And I'm like, "I don't know anything about business. I'm a lawyer, you know, not a very good one." And he said, "Oh, you'll figure it out." And so I drove over to the Tan office and like knocked on the door, like, hi, I'm the new boss. Hi,
Yeah.
and it was
How many
very, very
people?
strange.
How many people were working there at the time?
It was about 35 people, I think.
Many
And
people,
I'll never
huh?
forget. Yeah, I never forget my very first day as in business. Never read a business book, never did anything. I had to lay off 13 people day one. I
Oh,
did more day
man.
two. And so it was, but here's the thing. This is how stupid I was. So I'm sitting there and like I start calling in people that I had to let go of. And I knew like we don't need accountants. We have them back in Charlotte. There were certain things that we knew we could let go of. So I'm bringing people. I said, listen, I'm not firing you. The bankruptcy court fired you. I'm just not rehiring you. You see, I'm just not rehiring you. And it did not work. It was like they didn't care. I was the monster. They hated me.
How many
But
years
really
ago was
technically
that?
every person was laid off and I had to figure out who I'm going to employ. But that sales pitch didn't work at all to make them feel any better. They still lost their jobs. So,
How
but
many years ago?
eventually that was October 8th, 2008. I'll never forget it. So we kind of consider that our
young little
birthday.
whippersnapper having to go
I
in
know,
and fire everybody.
Yeah. So I think I was 29 at the time. And so anyway, eventually we relocated TAN to Charlotte where we lived and we've been running ever since. And it's had unprecedented success and growth and it's very secure and it's amazing. And it's grown by multiples in every category. But so my father, I mean, I'm the majority owner now. It took quite some time, but I did my kind of put in my sweat equity over years and years. And I've been blessed with amazingly good people. And just I can't believe that, I remember sitting down and writing out goals of growth and success and the number of books we could distribute each year. And I remember like putting numbers down on paper, like pretty early on, flying back and forth to Chicago to go to this place. And we've so far surpassed all those numbers already. I had no idea how much God would really bless this thing. So it's very successful. But what the thing is every day of my life, guys, every day of my life, I find out some story about how a TAN book has really helped somebody. I mean, the stories just come in.
Oh, for sure.
And you have to remember to like make it like
shelf is TAN. That's like,
yeah, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that like sometimes it's a job and you're like, but you have to remember, we're a for-profit business. We're not a church. We're not a nonprofit. It's a family business. But you have to remember that it is also a ministry. And so, my dad always said, you can do good and do well at the same time. Like this is a good job to have. You can support your family. You can help a lot of people support their families, but the impact you can have. And so I've been really begin measuring success much more recently since we got our financials squared away because it was a bankrupt company. Once we could buy bread and milk, then, what I could say then is, okay, we want to measure our success by the impact that we're having. So we measure about how many books go out the door, how many views or how many open rates, all the metrics that you're measuring, because our goal now is impact. Since we're financially secure, we can really think impact versus money.
What's it like? Because most people are consuming books, audio books now, I would assume, like not even hard copy books anymore. Like the media is changing so much, like, and even like acquiring authors nowadays. Like, of course you have your legacy authors that have been writing books forever that I'm sure you get those, but how do you even go about like finding a new author that's going to have any kind of reach? Because it seems like everybody, like the people that write books are the people that have audiences already built. They're like, how do you get a new author to blow up? It's got to be a difficult thing.
Well, part of my secret sauce. All right, so I'm going to let in one of my trade secrets that I don't want any of my competitors to know, right? And it's that dealing with dead authors is a hell of a lot easier than dealing with living authors. Okay, they don't complain about their royalty check. They're
bringing something back into publishing that's been out of publishing for a long time. But
it's a very legit strategy, and so it's very clear. You can look at our catalog. We do living authors. Like we definitely release new books all the time. Okay, I think, but at one point we were publishing over 60 plus new books a year. That's more than one a week. And we're way down on that now. And so we publish less titles, but want to sell them 5 times as much as we used to. So we're very, very selective about the living authors that we do. And we can be a little bit more loose with the dead authors. But seriously, like some of the most important things we're doing, we have this series of books called the Tan Resurrection series. Here's the thing. This is amazing. Check this out. I think this is Catholic publishing at its finest. There are so many great saints, great authors throughout history that have untranslated works. They're stuck in Latin, never even put into English. So let's take Saint Bonaventure, okay? A doctor of the church. I cannot believe that there are a ton of stuff that he's never had translated into English before. And we're getting that translated. We find the Latin text. We're translating it into English for the first time. I mean, I'm like the second, other than the translator, I'm the second person on earth to ever read some of these things in English.
So
another
do you have
Thomas.
Do you have a full-time Latin translator on staff?
We have multiple contractors that do it. Yeah, multiple contractors. Yeah. So, so for example, Thomas à Kempis, known for writing Imitation of Christ. Now, everybody knows Imitation of Christ, one of the most important books ever. So what if you found out that there was like a dozen other books that this guy wrote that are still stuck in Latin?
Yeah.
And you're like, why are they stuck in Latin? So we have published multiple very small books. They're short little things. One on humility. Another book he wrote called Meditations on Death. And it's like he envisions a guy on his deathbed and the Grim Reaper is coming and like tempting him to despair. It's a very creative thing written by the author of Imitation of Christ. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And so there's so many cool things. St. Ambrose, St. Anselm. There's so many great old saints never before in English. That's the stuff that gets me really excited because, you know, these saints need somebody to keep pushing. There's always going to be another apologist and always another Bible scholar. And, you know,
we talk about it all the time,
but,
man. It's like, the way, especially with the way media is now, but like Catholic apologetics is just kind of getting a little stale, and we need some like, and to me, the best way to do Catholic apologetics now is to do it through history. So even you talking about like going back and finding these old saints and that's such a great way to do apologetics now, because I think church history is the way to bring people into the church now. It's you know, people have heard all the sola scriptura arguments. I mean, I think one of the first videos we had go big was like making fun of the video that says the greatest argument for sola scriptura you've ever heard. It's like, it's just, how many times can you watch a video like that?
Yeah, let me tell you about another example, if you don't mind. This is the first time I've no one knows about this yet, so it's kind of like my content guy might be like, "Why are you talking about this yet?" But I had the idea a long time ago. It was like, listen, I have a tremendous respect for all the Bible study scholars out there. There's tremendous. I mean, I'm friends with many of them. But then when you realize that, I mean, they're actually right here behind me, like this anti-Nicene father, the big church father set, which you guys have probably seen these, right? I mean, these all the church fathers, guys, they wrote the best Bible studies of all time, and all of our Bible scholars are really just making footnotes to what these guys did, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So it was like this. I'm not going to use a name because I respect all the Bible scholars out there, but if you were going to go and do like a Bible study by Joe Smith, Dr. Joe Smith, I hope there's not a real Dr. Joe Smith, but let's say that Dr. Joe Smith, you could study the Gospel of John with Dr. Joe Smith, or you could go to this church over here where Augustine is going to be teaching it. Who do you want to go to? Right. So I've created Alexio Divina. I'm not really interested too much in like Bible study. I'd rather use scripture to pray and like enrich my interior life more than like do Bible study, right? So we've created Lectio Divina with the fathers. And so we take one book at a time, okay? So like the Gospel of John. Well, Augustine wrote the best commentary on the Gospel of John, okay? And so one page has the text, like gospel, the chapter 1 from the Gospel of John, and then it has a short commentary by Augustine explaining that passage. And then we take you through a meditation and prayer based on Augustine's commentary. So you're really doing sort of a Lectio Divina with Augustine. Then we're going to do the same thing. Chrysostom on the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to do Jerome on the gospel on the book of Job. It goes on. And so it's like,
can I
let's
make a
study
recommendation?
scripture. Please. Yeah, please.
I want Cornelius a Lapide on Revelation.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I learn something new every day. That's a big name.
Seriously, Cornelius a Lapide. It's only in Latin from what I hear. There's no
Really?
English
Okay.
text of it. Cornelius a Lapide, and it's on Revelation. Because
I've heard of the Lapide. I've heard of that's like an amazing commentary on scripture. I think he did like the
on
whole
scripture.
Bible
He does all of it. I think some of it, like some of the New Testament, has already been translated, but the Apocalypse hasn't. And I've gotten excerpts of it, and it is mind blowing. Like he talks about the typology of how at the end of time, like how the Pope and like the cardinals and bishops are prefigured by the high priest and the Sanhedrin. And he goes through how like at the end times, it's going to be a star that fell from heaven. It could be a Pope. It's pretty risque stuff, especially in context of the things we're dealing with in the church right now.
All right. Well, look, if we do that, it's like dedication to Anthony at Catholicism.
Oh my goodness. If you do it, I will help you sell as many copies as possible.
All right. That's awesome. He says, but this is what we do. You see, and like this is exciting. But here's the challenge for me as a modern day publisher. How do I get people excited about guys who died in the 4th century? You know, and I think we can, but we have to. The brilliance is not knowing Augustine's brilliant. The brilliance is in repackaging it to where you can consume it in some edible way, because it's lost in those big fat books and no one's reading it anymore. They're reading all the modern day Bible scholars, which are great, but we're missing this tremendous heritage that we have. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who I'm completely addicted to right now, and I'm going to write my own biography on him, wrote the greatest commentary on the Song of Songs. So you guys know that book, kind of like a risque book, the romantic kind of erotic book, right? And he wrote this 4-volume set on the Song of Song is 6 pages in the Bible, guys. Yeah. It's 6 pages. And he wrote 4 volumes on it, right? So, but I now know why. And so we are going to do Alexio Divina with the Song of Songs by Bernard of Clairvaux. That's how we as Catholics should be encountering the Bible. We don't need to study the Bible. We need to pray the Bible, live the Bible, and study is a part of it. Same thing, full circle, guys, back to our first point in the conversation. Catechesis is overrated, in my opinion. It's more about formation, because when you have formation, the catechesis comes with it. If you pray scripture, you're going to learn scripture. So I think we put too much focus on education all the way around. We need to work on the interior life. Tan is all about the interior life. Tan doesn't do a lot of catechetical books, doesn't do a lot of apologetics, and we don't do a lot of cultural wars, right? I mean, yeah, I know the church, is corrupt and the government's corrupt. Congratulations. We all know it. And the moon landing was faked. We know it, right? But guess what? After I'm pissed off, after I read all the articles about all the corruption, tomorrow morning, Conor Gallagher has to climb out of bed and be a saint. And what's going to help me do that? Reading about the corruption in the church, or reading St. Francis de Sales on how to fulfill the duties of my station in life. And so Tan is dedicated to helping you guys and your spouses with your interior life, as opposed to just getting you more and more pissed off about everything that's going wrong in the world.
Yeah, that's a good philosophy. Conor, this was awesome, man. I wasn't sure how to handle it, because I did, like I said, the first time I saw you on Kennedy's show, and I thought Kennedy handled that interview horribly. And
man,
I'm not kidding. I watched it with Rob, and I go, this guy, I love Kennedy.
I'm gonna have to text Kennedy right now and warn him.
We talk all the time. But I'm like, I don't know. He kind of presented it like an infomercial, and I didn't like it. I'm like, I kind of want to dig into Conor a little bit and like get to know him and maybe hear some like real. So what books do we want to promote before we hop off?
Well, I'll tell you what. I just started my own podcast.
If you got anything to promote, for sure.
Yeah, Conor Gallagher Show, and it's on Spotify and YouTube. It's on our Tan YouTube channel. But check out. You can just search Conor Gallagher Show. We've had some great guests. And by the way, the second episode, I was shameless and put my wife on there, and it was basically me and the co-host asking Ashley about how you raise 16 kids. Because I was funny, I was stupid. I go around and talk about it as if I'm the expert. I mean, she's the expert,
Yeah.
So it was awesome. It's got a lot of views because everyone loves hearing this lady talk about raising all these kids. But yeah, we've had some really good guests so far. I got everybody from Rick Santorum signed up. I got Bishop Strickland signed up.
Nice.
Some really good guests coming. So I'm very proud of that. But the books, one of my most recent releases is You Have Only One Problem. So I write these little books. See how thin that is? You can read it in like an hour. And the whole idea there, guys, is like we don't and just stop saying we could do another episode on this, but I promise not to make it long. But here's the thing: I have this amazing insight that I've gotten from the church fathers. We don't really have a whole bunch of problems like financial problems, social problems, health problems. No, we have one problem, and that is we have not trustfully surrendered all of those sufferings to our Lord. If you surrender everything, then all of those perceived problems, you see, they're just sufferings. Sufferings are fine because they redeem us. But so I've tried to stop saying to myself, guys, like, I don't want to say I got all these problems. I want to say, no, I got one problem and I got a bunch of sufferings. It's a better way to think about it. And it's might sound like just like words, semantics, but tell yourself from now on, you got one problem and you got 100 sufferings. And those sufferings are redemptive. And by the way, saints always get through those sufferings and say, oh, it was a blessing in disguise. You're right, because God knows exactly what he's doing by prescribing you the remedy by giving you suffering. It's like a bitter pill that you have to swallow, and it brings about your redemption. It's not a problem. A problem is something you got to fix. A problem is something you got to change. You don't have to change your sufferings because God might want you to have it. But you do have to change one thing, and that's a problem, and that is you don't fully surrender to divine providence. So that's what the little book is about. But of course, yeah, there's Parenting for Eternity and there's Welder Family. But just come to welderfamily.com or tanbooks.com, either one, and you can see some of these books. But, why buy Conor Gallagher's books? Don't buy my books. Forget my books. Go buy the saints' books. They're the better people. Read the church fathers. Read the saints, and we got a ton of them. Read those guys. Forget me. You don't need my stuff. You need saints stuff.
Well, you got us our interview with Bishop Schneider last year, and that was a really, really like a turning point for us. Like it was like the first time we wore button down shirts and everything for that one. It was like, but so we appreciate that. And if there's anything we can ever do to help you out, you let us know. But so the Conor Gallagher Show on YouTube. Anything you guys buy at Tan is going to help Conor out. So, and I'm going to
have links to everything we talked about in the description. So,
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we're looking forward to meeting you in North Carolina next week, man.
Yeah, and the request I try to finish every interview. At least I've started recently, and realized I've wasted a lot of my years not doing this. Your viewers, if you got anything good out of this, you got to say a prayer for Conor Gallagher that he stops being an idiot and becomes a better husband and father. Say one little prayer for me, and I'll be eternally grateful.
Sounds good, brother. All right, Rob, take us out. Conor, hang out for a second after the credits roll, and
sure.
We'll talk in the green room real quick. All right. We'll see you guys next time.